Hi everyone, welcome back. So now what we will do is, as per our previous discussion, uh, we will see how the DNS server is configured separately from our two node. Why we are configuring DNS here is because in Oracle cluster where scan listener is very important so that uh, eventually when clients are trying to communicate to a specific database service, scan listeners are the listeners which are intelligent enough to route the connection to the least loaded node, as well as they have many properties, but one of their property is routing the traffic to the specific node, to the specific service, and to the least loaded node. Before that there was VIP only. So what was the issue with the VIP was that VIP, practically when you speak about VIP, then there when you speak about VIP, then VIP is virtual IP exactly, but you know that every node has a IP address. That is 100% correct, but what you what users used to do is, in the earlier version of Oracle, when they wanted to actually connect to the database node, somehow they were able to connect, but the problem was that when in case of when the node is down or somehow it goes down, uh, the the time to notify the clients that this current node is down would take around 10 minutes to notify them, and actually until then they won't know about if the node is down or not down, and then eventually they will see the pop-up saying that this current node is down, connect to the other node. And now what they needed to do is connect using tnsnames.aura and directly connecting to the specific node which is up. That is very painful. Then came the VIP. What happens that VIP is actually set up on top of the physical network card, and VIP is kind of intelligent in the way that when users are when clients are connecting to clients actually wanted to connect to specific service, the traffic goes to the particular node, to the particular VIP. Let's say if that particular node is down, then what happens that the VIP which is running on top of that physical Ethernet card on that particular node will let the VIP will actually route and migrate the virtual IP to the other node, and it will start running on that particular node. But the thing is that still it was painful. It would take a lot of time for that. Then came the scan, and scan would resolve all these things for the purpose as when the users wanted to connect, the first layer they will touch is scan listeners. Scan listener will directly communicate with virtual IP, and virtual IP will specifically route uh, uh, virtual IP actually running on top of the physical network card, and it will serve the users eventually. So scan IP layer, why they have created is scan IP is intelligent enough to notify the users. Let's say one when one node goes down, and virtual IP shifts to the other node, so virtual IP will inform scan, and scan will know that this particular node is down. Now I have to route the traffic to the other node, specific other node. Okay, that is the one property. The other property is TNS names. file. So TNS names file is a local file sitting at the client workstation. So on client workstation they needed to update the virtual IP. They had to previously in the earlier version they had to update the virtual IP and specify which the number of virtual IP. Let's say there are 4 nodes, then they needed to specify 4 virtual IP. So let's say one fails, then connection will automatically try the another one, then the another one, then the another one. That is how it was done before. But now comes the scan listener and the scan IP. So what scan IP will do is scan IP will has the logic where scan IP will be set up in the DNS itself, and it will resolve to 3 IP addresses. So users or clients or application team do not need to keep updating the IP address or virtual IP. Let's say there was 2 node cluster. Now there was a requirement that the infrastructure has been expanded. Now there is 4 node cluster. Now the application team or everybody in the application team needs to update that those particular virtual IP and the IP addresses into their tnsnames.aura file. That was painful. But using the scan name, because scan resolves to 3 IP addresses, and those 3 IP addresses will automatically be routable to specific nodes, whichever is least loaded. So they just needed to specify scan name in the tnsnames.aura, and that is very easy. Now let's say if one node is added, then this is the total burden of the infrastructure team to set up the virtual IP and all those things. But clients do not have to change anything at their end. They will still be connecting using the scan name, and the scan listeners will be routing the connection to the local listeners. So that was the 2 benefit why the scan listeners has been created. So now the scan listener scan names has to be, if you talk about the real-time environment, then the scan names will be set up in DNS, and when you try to NS lookup after the cluster where a setup is completed, when you try to NS lookup to the scan names, it will resolve to 3 IP addresses. And those ones, when you keep using the NS lookup and try multiple times, you will see that the IP addresses keep on rotating. The first one goes to second one goes to third, and like that. So it's round robin. So it's not like first IP addresses will be static. So it will be round robin. That's how DNS works, and that is how the IP addresses will be given to the clients. Okay, so this is the discussion about scan listener, which I promised earlier. Now let's so because I have already set up my DNS server, but what I will do is I will show you the path of how you need to actually set up and what all parameters are there, so that you guys don't get confused while setting it up. And if there is an issue eventually while setting up a scan listener, the scan name and the DNS and all these things, then you guys can comment in the thread, and then I will reply to that. So okay, moving on. So let's see the steps whatever I have mentioned. So it's saying that install the bind binaries, but what I will do is I will add on one more step, because download is the first step. The CentOS binaries and install. So this is the first step. You guys already know, as you guys have seen how Oracle Enterprise Linux was installed. Now in this scenario, you do not need /grid You do not need /oracle. You do not need that much space. So while selecting, so let me show you, when you create the virtual machine, let's say you create a new virtual machine and select typical, and let's say I'm going to select specific machine. Just a second. Okay, so this is the same thing. It's repetitive stuff. Nothing is new. You name them, you browse and locate the specific path where you have storage and space available. In here you don't need to mention 80 gig, 40 gig is enough, and you can split it into virtual multiple files and then configure it. And you don't need multiple network interface NIC cards. In here, for network adapter, there is default one network adapter. Just change it into bridge and just close. Just save it and start it and install it. Installation is completely same, nothing different, nothing new. Make sure that you enter the root password and make sure to remember the root password. As soon as everything done, you will see the screen. I'll pull up. You need to enter the root. Now, you guys remember, right? One thing. Let me show you what you need to remember. When you saw this host file before, you must have seen I have mentioned DNS. So what I did is I picked up one of the IP addresses from my network, 192.168.10. So 149 I picked up, so that everything is kind of serial 149, 150, 151 kind of, and named this machine as CentOS.local domain. It can be anything, but make sure that it has to be fully qualified. So .local, .lab, whatever it is, and this is the third value. Please put that too. So that's done on the hosts file. As soon as that's done, configure the IP address on the machine as well. So what you need to do in this case is wired setting. You click on that gearbox, go on the IPv4, and then configure all the things. Gateway is pointing to the router. Okay, this has to be pointing to the router if you want to install anything, otherwise you won't be able to install the bind package. And DNS is same, don't miss this. So this can be different, it can be 1.1, it can be 172 IP address, whatever it is, but make sure that when you go to your machine, so let's say, let me give you an example. So if you are amateur and if you don't know what IP address to put, you just do pull up your cmd command prompt and then IP config. So you see that your wireless LAN or your physical has been assigned an IP address. It means that this is your network, this is 10, and this goes up till 255. So you have 255 IP addresses available for you to play around with. You don't have that much devices at your home, so make sure that everything is serial for rack as well as for CentOS. This is for my current machine, that is different, but for this 149 I have provided, and 150, 151 for the rack machines. So that's what I'm trying to show you. Cancel this. Okay. Okay, moving forward. First step first. As soon as you have an internet routable IP address assigned, you just run this. So I'll show you. This is already installed, so it will throw the error saying that everything is already installed. This is how you installed before. You will install the same thing. Second piece. So now important part. You, as soon as this is installed, you have to start configuring the DNS. In general, DNS is actually is a service which will translate your host name to an IP address or IP address into host name. When it is translating into from the name to an IP, it is forward lookup zone. Just remember that forward lookup zone from host to IP. If it is resolving from IP to host, then it is reverse lookup. We will need to create two zones so that it will be resolvable from IP to host name. When you type ping, a ping command, and then type google.com, what happens, that is forward lookup zone for Google. It will resolve into specific IP, and when you type Google's or any IP address, it will automatically resolve into the host name where that IP is assigned. So those two zones has to be configured, but that is later part. The first step is you have to configure the DNS configuration file that is sitting in /etc/named.com. I'll copy it. I'll show you cat/etc. You have to vi/etc. Sorry, I'll paste it. So there are specific sections. DNS listens on the port 53, which is well-renowned port. In this section, you see that 127.0.0.1. This is a loopback address. So when you want to ping yourself, this is the address. And then you have to mention what is the DNS server IP address. This is the area where you configure that IP address. So it means that it want to say that I am the DNS server and I am listening on port 53, which is DNS server itself. So make sure to mention the IP address in there. So my DNS server IP address is 192.168.10.149. This is for IP basics. That's the reason I actually, what do you call that, comment it out. I don't want to see that, so I don't want to resolve that. That's the reason I commented it out. I don't want to configure it. Okay, keep going down, keep going down. Anything more? Yes. Now I have talked about reverse lookup and forward lookup, right? This is the forward lookup zone. This is the reverse lookup zone. Now this starts with zone. This particular section is already created, but the values in here are not already created. Those, when I installed it, and as soon as I installed it, the directory and the file created, that is /var and the /name.conf, which has been installed, it will give you a template. It won't have correct values. You need to configure that correct value. So first correct value was 192.168.10.149, which I saw, you see in that pink color. The second config, and make sure that semicolon will be at the end. This video can be longer because not everybody configure DNS server. This is configured in the real environment. This will be configured by a network team. A database team will be requesting network team to configure all these details, and that's how they configure it. But currently you are setting up your own lab for the practice and to know how everything is done. That's what I'm trying to show you. So when you see zone in these codes, there will be some dummy value available. You have to mention your domain name. So mine domain name is local domain. So when you saw the hosts file, I'll show you again. You see this local domain dot local domain, just like .com. If my domain would have been com, then I would have been mentioning com, but here the current domain is local domain, so I'll mention local domain. In was already there, just go down, type master, you don't need to change anything. Okay, this is the file. So what will happen is, while when DNS checks this particular section, it will look up to the local domain .zone file. This can be any name. This can be any name, but this file need to exist in the particular location. I will show you the location, and there needs to be a particular value mentioned in there. So make sure don't do the mistake. Create this, say the name whatever you want to say in here, but make sure that everything is available in the particular location. The file exists in the particular location, and allow the update. So this value, allow update none, this was not available, so you need to make sure that you need to put that. So what needs to be done is, I might share you these details, or you can look up to the video and just copy it the same way, configure the same way. But make sure that when you create a domain, you might create a domain like lab.lab, let's say CentOS.lab, then you have to mention lab, not the local domain, otherwise it will keep failing. Okay, now this was the forward lookup zone. This means that when I want to resolve from hostname to IP address, then I will look up to this zone and this file local domains or .zone. When I want to resolve IP address to hostname, then this zone will be looked up. So the name you see here is same, everything is same, but here the reverse of IP address, when you see that 10.168.192. This network address will be same, but don't provide the complete IP address. Just go until the network address. So what do you call the network address? 192.168.10 is the network area, network section, which is your network, and then after that dot, and then until 255, those 255 IP addresses are assignable to any devices in your network. So let's say if your IP address is 172.16. whatever, then 172.16.10 will be your network section, and the last part will be your host address. For more details, you can look up how the subnetting and network works in YouTube videos or any videos. Okay, let's go on. Same thing you can mention in the bottom as well, but this is a file. This file needs to exist, and allow update was not existing, you need to create it. That's done. I'll close it, save and quit. So first section is done. That has to be same. Now So this one, let me change the values. So I was telling you guys about the zone files, right? So these files existing in var named local domain.zone, but it won't exist currently when you set up the new DNS server. You have to vi the file. So what you need to do is vi /var named and local domain.zone, and then fill in the values, which I will show you now. So let me cat the file. Make sure that everything is same, otherwise it will fail. Okay. So what this file is trying to show you? This file is showing that there is a variable which accepts some values. It accepts the time to live. So this is in seconds. Make sure. Actually, you can change the values, but better to keep this way. This @ sign means for all. In means internet. Start of authority. So it's trying to say is start of authority is you are the DNS server. So CentOS dot local domain dot. So this is root zone. CentOS dot local domain, whatever the server name is. Leave this value root. This is a root file, because why we are mentioning it here is because you are the root domain, and you don't need to look up for any details to another DNS server. You already have information in you. That is the reason you are root domain for yourself. These are the parameters for the values which are sitting in there. So DNS server will cache some information. So let's say I am from my machine pinging google.com, so it will automatically cache the information into its DNS cache, so that it doesn't waste time the next time when I'm trying to ping google.com. It will have all the details and all the routes how to go to google.com, and it will the query will be faster, kind of. So that's what the logic is behind these parameters. Just copy and paste the same way. This is a name server. This is a DNS server, which is name server as well. It means that I am the DNS server. Now you see a record. A record means the host name and IP address. So it says CentOS has a record which has IP address this. Rack 1, you don't need to mention the fully qualified, so mention all the details, rack scan and everything, all the IP addresses. So how much IP addresses are needed, I'll show you. I think I have mentioned somewhere. Okay, so yeah, we mentioned these two in our hosts file /etc/hosts, but besides that we need to mention all these into the zone file as well. So there will be public IP addresses, 2 nodes means 2 IP addresses, 2 private interconnect IP addresses for each node, 2 virtual IP which will be installed on top of the physical network interface card, and 3 scan. So this I was talking about rack scan. When somebody will try to resolve using NS lookup, it will resolve into 181, 182, 183, any one of them. When client want to connect, they will be given any of the IP addresses, and it will automatically route the connection to the specific node. That's how it's done. So when you guys are trying to set up the rack environment, make sure that you have something in the notepad in the same way, so that in future when you want to copy paste, you have something in reference. Okay, that was the zone file. for the forward lookup zone. I'll actually share that this particular complete thing to you guys. You guys can modify. I'll actually share the document as well. Now the reverse lookup zone. I'll get it. So the top information is same, nothing different. Just an add-on, CentOS.local domain. This is specific to the reverse lookup zone. Reverse lookup zone is the one in.arpa. And just make sure that you mention the information the same way. These are the end IP addresses. You see the specific IP address. It has not mentioned the 192.168.10 because it's mentioned here. Just a pointer record for the rack1.local. So 150 is pointing to rack1. 151 is pointing to rack 2, and that's how it goes. And you see one difference, there is no private IP address. Don't mention the private IP addresses. If you guys have any questions regarding specific details, what is this and what is that and why this parameter is mentioned, I am not able to start up my service and other things. Okay, for any details you guys can go to YouTube thread and then paste your questions, and then I'll try to answer those. I understand that it's not easy to set up DNS server. Not everybody is Linux admin and not everybody is Oracle DBAs. So yeah, it may take some time. I'll show you guys an alternate way of setting this scan name in future, the easier way, but this is what the real environment has. That is the reason I was trying to show you guys. Now moving on. Let's see, let me show you the resolve file. So what is resolve file? Resolve file is actually, because as I have already told you, we are NS, which is name server. We are DNS server on our own. So the resolve.conf should have name server as our IP addresses. You can put multiple name servers. It means that, okay, let's say your computer which wants to access the internet, for that reason you will have the name server as the DNS server which is assigned to your router, which in my case was 192.168.10.1. That's how I'm actually routing my traffic out of my private network, the home network, to the public network. But in current situation, because we are setting up DNS server on our own, so we can give the preference to the DNS server as ourselves, because we want to serve as DNS server for the two nodes for the clusterware environment. But we can mention the another name server as well, which is the other IP address, which is 192.168.10.1, so that eventually if we really want to access the internet, we can still do so. There can be multiple DNS server. One machine can look up to multiple DNS names. So that's how it goes. So if you have 5 DNS server, you can just mention one after another, saying that name server this, name server that, kind of. You will see this detail. Okay, so search, it's if you have searched, so the search parameter will have the domain name, and the name server in here is 192.168.10.1. I would have put in the name server as 192.168.10.149 itself, but currently I want to access the internet. I have put this. So you guys have to put the same details. Make sure that IP addresses coincides with your router IP addresses. Now finally, you need to stop the firewall. You just need to run these two commands, systemctl, because this is the latest version of Linux, so service stop and the service name won't work. Systemctl is the current command which will work, or actually the older command will also work, but use this one. This one has a lot of options. So systemctl, this is the current version, which will have different commands. The systemctl can be used. So stop the firewall D and make sure that disable it, otherwise when you restart this server it will start again. So make sure that disable this firewall D service, and as soon as that's done, your DNS is completely set up. Now you will ask question to yourself, how do I know that what is the status of DNS service? So let's check the DNS service. System CTL status named. It says active and running. If it is somehow stopped, somehow this is stopped, then you have to just start it, saying start, because in my case it's already started, so I don't need to worry, or stop it. So that's done. It needs to be active. If there is an error, then you guys can contact me about it. So thank you very much for this video. It's been a very long video, but this was very important video. Make sure to set up properly, follow every logic, and ask me questions, and then share the details if something is an issue, and if I can resolve, then I'll be happy. Thank you.